Geometry charts can be really confusing and scary looking. I mean, look at all those numbers between chainstay length, fork rake, head tube angle, bottom bracket drop. It's really easy to take a look at a geometry chart and just not want to bother with it. You know, just get me on a bike that I can ride and so I don't have to worry about numbers. But geometry charts and knowing how to decipher all those numbers are really key for knowing how a bike will handle and getting a bike that will fit you correctly. Lucky for you, I also hate numbers and I also got a B in high school geometry, so I am the perfect person to tell you how to read a geometry chart. If I can read a geometry chart, you definitely can too. So let's demystify those numbers so you can get a bike that fits you and get some insight into how a bike handles before you even ride it. This comprehensive guide to reading geometry charts will have two parts. This is the first part here. We're going to talk about in this video how geometry charts relate to your bike fit, and also how to adjust your bike to get it to fit you correctly. The second parts of this guide, which will come out soon enough, will talk about how geometry of a bike will affect the handling. So with that, let's talk about bike fit. Fit is the most important aspect of any bike, and in this video we'll talk about how the frame and the components relate to your bike fit. The common convention for fitting a bike is to get a frame based on your height and your standover height. This is completely wrong. There's a whole lot more information that you need to know when you're getting a bike. Your entire body is on the bike, but your height and your standover height only give you proportions for half of your body. Buying a bike based on standover and height is like deciding you don't like a restaurant based on Yelp reviews. It's like buying pants based on only your waist size. It's like deciding to marry somebody after you've only been on 3 dates. There's more information that you need to know when you buy a bike. On top of not just having enough information, this seat tube length and the standover varies from bike to bike. There's no standard measurement for comparing the seat tube length from one bike to another bike. Some companies measure from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the top tube, while other companies measure from the center of the bottom bracket to the top of the top tube. And this just becomes even more complicated when you have slanting top tubes, and it's just a whole mess. And even some companies don't even tell you how they measured their seat tube. Bikes labeled the same size seat tube can be completely different sizes in reality. In short, you need more information than just your height and your standover height. And also, even if that was enough information, there's so much variance between companies and how they measure things and how they are spec'd that it's just not going to get you on a bike that fits correctly most of the time. Sorry about the whole spiel here, but it is really important that you do not buy a bike based on only your height and standover height. So with that, how exactly do you fit a bike properly? To get a good fit, use a fit calculator. Competitive Cyclists, I've mentioned them a bunch of times before, has a really good fit calculator, and you can find it in the description below. And after you do the whole song and dance of having your friend take your measurements and getting really dangerously close to your no-no zone, then the calculator will spit out a bunch of numbers. You will then compare these numbers from the calculator to the numbers on your prospective bike's geometry chart. The top tube is the most important measurement to look at. Find a bike that has a top tube that is within the range of the top tube length that is given by your calculator, and then attach an appropriately sized stem. Together, the stem and the top tube length will give you your bike's reach. Reach just means how far you have to extend your upper body to reach the handlebars. And it is key for getting a proper fit. To understand reach a little bit more, let's take a look at an example. A 57 centimeter top tube length frame with a 90mm stem will fit very similarly to a 56 centimeter top tube frame with a 90mm stem. Of course, your reach depends upon the angle of your stem, and you're going to get different results if you're not using a 17-degree stem. Because of that, you can find what stem angles give what reach with the stem calculator in the description below. I've said this a bunch of times because it's super important. The top tube length is the most important measurement that you need to keep track of. The seat tube length and standover height don't mean squat because seat tube length varies a bunch, and also standover doesn't really mean much because you'll be riding your bike and not standing over it like 90% of the time. It's a whole lot easier to extend your seat post than it is to extend your top tube or your stem. So get the correct size top tube, yo. Like for real. The first component that affects fit is your saddle, and it affects it in two ways. First, the saddle height, and second, the fore-aft position of your saddle. Having the proper saddle height lets you pedal more efficiently. That means you'll be able to go faster, and you'll also be more comfortable. As a whole, your bike will feel lighter. A good place to start for your saddle height is to have your knees slightly bent at the bottom of your pedal stroke. To dial in your saddle height, ride your bike and raise your saddle about an inch or so for every 10 miles that you ride. Once your saddle gets too high, you're going to feel some tension in your Achilles tendon. Once you get to that point where you do feel that soreness, do lower your saddle about half an inch or so in increments until you don't feel that soreness anymore. The second part about positioning your saddle is the fore-aft position. How far forward or how far back is your saddle on the rails? A lot of people use the COP system, that is the knee over pedal spindle system, and it's kind of like a rule of thumb to get you in the right range for getting the fore-aft position of your bike. It's used for 73 to 75 degree angle seat tubes, so it doesn't work for every single bike out there. And it's also designed for racers, meaning that you're going to put more weight on your hands, which may be uncomfortable if that's not your riding style. But it is a good place to start. The knee over pedal spindle system of getting your fore-aft position is really simple. Your knee in the 3 o'clock position will be over the pedal spindle, and you measure this with a plumb line. And this works pretty well for most people. But if you want more comfort out of your ride, if you're doing some long distance ridings, or if you just kind of have a more relaxed riding style, moving your saddle back on the rails or getting a set back seat post will make your riding style more comfortable, as more weight will be on your saddle and not on your hands. Keep in mind that moving your saddle back will also affect the reach to your handlebars, so if you move your saddle back too much, you might have to get a shorter stem. On the other side of that coin, you can move your saddle forward and towards the handlebars to put more weight on your hands. This leads to a more aggressive riding style, as it allows you to get into a more crouched and aero position more easily. It also leads to more comfort when you're pushing hard on the pedals. Again, how far forward or how far back you move your saddle really depends on your riding style. The second component you want to keep track of for your fit are your handlebars, specifically the handlebar height. This is often measured with saddle to bar drop, which is just how far apart is your saddle and your handlebars. Saddle to bar drop is really a personal preference. Again, it depends on your riding style. A more aggressive rider will want to have a huge saddle to bar drop to put some more weight on their hands and to put some more weight on the pedals and not and off of the saddle, so they can pedal harder. If you have a more relaxed riding style, you want to decrease your saddle to bar drop to put more weight on your saddle, which is good for distance riding. I personally prefer something that's more in the middle, where I can ride reasonably fast and also be comfortable enough. Saddle to bar drop is a key source of comfort, and it's really important for getting it right to your riding style. You can lower or raise your handlebars by adjusting your stem, and this will depend on whether you have a threadless or a threaded stem. A threadless stem clamps around the fork steer, and the height is limited by the steer length. A threaded stem, on the other hand, wedges into the fork steer, and the height is limited by the coil length. Because of that, it's easier to get higher handlebars by changing your stem or by raising your stem with a threaded system. And that's what you need to keep in mind when you're fitting your bike. Of course, first do a fit calculation, keep in mind the top tube length, and then adjust your components accordingly. In the second part to this two-part series, we're going to take a look at how bike geometry affects handling, and we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty of those scary numbers. If you want to stay updated on the channel, please do give me a follow on Instagram and Twitter, and if you want to check out my rides, I am on Strava. And if you're new to the channel and you want to have fixed gear videos just like this one sent straight to your sub box twice a week, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video with lots of numbers.